Students, hi. Catherine Robertson here. Um, Business 103, Principles of Management. Hopefully, it looks like you all had success. And I'm popping back over. Whoops. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Popping back over to your Blackboard. In week one, it looks like most of you were able to submit an intro discussion post and review chapters 1 and 2 and submit your homework. If anyone's having issues submitting homework or figuring out where to submit homework, shoot me an email or shoot me a text, 814-490-6473. And let me know so that we don't get you too far behind, because it's an 8-week course and it moves pretty quickly. Hopefully you not only did you post your intro, hopefully you were able to look at a few of the other folks in the class and kind of get an idea of some of the different students that you are taking courses with here at EC3. And it looks like almost everybody was able to post, and multiple folks have replies. So great job on your first. And I see a lot of you are full-time students. Many of you I've had in other classes. So hopefully you will find this class rewarding. I do think that this class is really one of the backbone. You have your Business 101 course, but this is really one of those backbone courses that encompasses so many things relating to business, right? Because business, whether you have 1 or 2 employees or you're running Google, right? Or a department in Google, having good management skills, or whether you're just working on projects or in life, right? Having good management skills and kind of knowing what works and what doesn't, it isn't always intuitive. And we see that a lot of you probably can identify a manager that you had that was exceptional. And maybe you know why, you can point to certain things, but maybe you don't even realize what made them so good. Like you would do anything for them, right? And they were able to empower different folks to do things. And you can also probably identify a really crappy manager that you may, or someone, an employer or a boss that you had that just could not get it right. Or maybe it was a coworker, right? That they struggled to be, empower or be liked by the folks around them. And so really, when we're looking at, this is more of a philosophical course, as I mentioned before, and a theory-based course. So we're going to look at a bunch of different folks, which we did, which we are in chapter 3. And, they're the big names in management theory, right? What works, what doesn't. And we didn't really have management theories until, really the last 100, 200 years that really kind of surfaced. Because before that, there was a lot of folks ran their own businesses. It was a market economy around the globe, right? And as businesses grew after the Industrial Revolution, they needed to have a way to, have different departments do different things. They needed logistics, they needed supply chain. They needed ways to keep track of things and organize their companies, right? And so when we're looking at chapter 3, and I gave you 2 videos in there, one on the Hawthorne studies, which is such an important study, right? If you have nothing from this course, but you take away the idea of the Hawthorne studies, make sure you watch that video. It's from the early part of the 1900s. And what they found was remarkable. Right? And they didn't find it because it was what they set out to do. Most of you know the scientific method. You have an idea, you have a theory, you test the theory, and you either confirm your hypothesis or idea or you refute it, right? And what they did in the Hawthorne studies is they had an idea and they wanted to improve production, and they tried to do some things to improve production. And oddly enough, a byproduct is they found something else out that wasn't really part of what their study had been designed or intended for. And so what they found was this idea of giving employees, giving folks attention, right? Making them feel like they are part of something, making them feel like there's a bigger buy-in than they're just going to work for a paycheck, right? Or to, crunch some numbers, or to get a certain amount of widgets done for the day, right? Those items do not hold humans, right? We're employees. That doesn't hold us together. That doesn't hold us together as a team for a company. And there needs to be something deeper, right? And so trying to find those deeper things is really what the entire field of management theory has looked for, right, over the last 100 years, really. And it's funny because we still see so many companies that could be so much better if we were to study them, right? They could be so much better if their management team or the way they're organized was done in a way that appreciated employees more, rather than trying to push them more, right? Set the goals higher, and do those. And even just the idea of compensation, right? We can always get compensated. Oh, that sounds great. I get a raise, or I get a bonus. But those things, as soon as you get the bonus, when's my next bonus coming, right? As soon as you get a raise, when's my next raise coming? And so they're very short term, right? This idea of buy-in and treating your employees like they are something and a part of something bigger really is a larger buy-in than even bonuses, raises, things like that. And so companies, across the globe, but in particular in the U.S., could somehow, these companies that maybe are struggling, and instead of, making everyone work extra and pick up extra things, somehow reflected on their employees and allowed their employees to feel important, and gave them some praise once in a while, for lack of a better item. Anyway, so when you're thinking about the Hawthorne studies, think about that impact on the company you currently work for, if you're working at a companies you have worked for, and also think about your own management skills. This is a time in this course and in your studies here at EC3 to think about the type of person you want to be, right? You want to be the good manager. You want to be the good communicator. You want to be the person that, gets things done, empowers people, right? You don't want to be the bad manager that people refer to. You don't want to struggle with employees, right? And so that's also our goal. My goal is that make things a little easier for you by making things better, right? When things go smoothly, they go more easily, right? And so learning some skills that can help you with communication and with management really is the key for this course. Anyway, so Chapter 3 really highlights the individuals, and I have a few questions there for you, chapter review questions on page 80. But really, it goes into, and Fayol's 14 principles, another. So there's some really key fellas in the Chapter 3. Fayol's 14, and this, 14 principles, so important. Porter's 5 forces, right? Make sure that you review those 5 forces. And also Frederick Winslow Taylor, right? Talking about the Industrial Revolution and his 4 principles of management. And I'm looking for, here he is. And Max, how it's pronounced technically, and we see him a lot in psychology. So if you take psych classes, you'll see Max Weber or Max Weber, if you will. And so there's a lot of intertwining between management and psychology, as you could imagine, right? How do people function? How do they function in groups? What size groups are ideal for certain types of projects, right? And so thinking about the idea of bureaucracy, right? And Elton Mayo and the Hawthorne studies. And so there's even a picture of it in your textbook. And there's a kind of a timeline there too, and that on page 77 that really stresses, what each Elton Mayo, Henry Fayol, Max Weber, Frederick Taylor, Mary Parker Follett, what is the focus really of their management theory, right? So like Elton Mayo really looked at teams and motivation. And Frederick Winslow Taylor was really a lot about motivation and human resource design, or compensation design. How do we compensate our employees in the most advantageous way to really boost, production, but boost their spirits? And then we look at Chester Bernard and Mary Parker Follett. They really looked at leadership as the key thing in their theories. So there's a few review questions there for you, and then we pop over to Chapter 4, and we start to look at, and there's a few examples in Chapter 4 for you when we look at the external and internal organizational environments, right? And we look at corporate culture. And I have a short video there for you about corporate culture and what that really means. And so, I've had students that have graduated and gone on, not only here, but other institutions that I've worked at, that we thought they found their dream job, right? And they got there and they started working a few months in, they're like, I hate it. And they would say to me, Professor Robertson, what do I do? I moved across the country to take this great job and it just doesn't seem like a good fit. Not every culture or corporate culture or company is going to be a good fit for you, right? We're all a little bit different. Just like, and so thinking about how we all drive different cars, right? We wear similar clothes, but we all wear different clothes, right? We all like different things. We all have a favorite color. And so if you think that just because you pick something, it's going to be a good fit, it might not. And don't be too hard on yourself. A lot of times I'll see students that are they take a new job and they get so excited and it's not what they thought. And then they feel like, how did I miss the mark? And I say, you didn't. It's okay, right? You can, learn what you can from the organization and then just have an exit plan into a new culture and try to do your homework about the different companies that you're applying for. It's as important that you know about them as they know about you, because you don't want to be sucked into a company that you just really don't like, because then you have to look again, right? And so making sure that you do your homework about how a company is structured. The example of Jeff Bezos in here when you read through and thinking about an organization and a lot of these things we touched on in 101. So if you had, which you probably did because I teach most of the 101 courses, and you use that Business 10 textbook, talking about an organization and the different factors, right, that come into play, the macro forces that come into play for an organization, technological, economic, sociocultural, and government and political forces, things like that come into play when an organization is functioning. What did we just have recently? COVID, right? That was an external force that was really wreaked havoc on a lot of industries and a lot of businesses, a lot of small businesses, large businesses as well. So each of those are discussed. This is also the chapter, we've talked about a SWOT analysis and other courses, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And remember that the strengths and the weaknesses are the internal, right? And we're always trying to look at our weaknesses and then flip them and turn them into our strengths. And then the external, the opportunities and threats, what are the things out there that we can capture? And what are the threats that are coming down the pike? And are we ready for them, right? Can we somehow turn them into an opportunity? It talks also about, in chapter 4, organic versus mechanistic. And let's see, what other important components? Oh, there's some hierarchical charts in here when we talk about divisional organizational structure. So organizations sometimes are structured in a silo mode, and there's a picture of that on page, looks like 95. I don't have my reading glasses on. These numbers are so tiny. And so structural, and I'll hold that up for a second. The structural look about it, where you have all of the different, right? If you've seen a flow chart for different organizations, often you will see that. It's nice, then you know exactly who you report to. However, oftentimes in the siloed situation, we see a lot of redundancies happening within the organization versus if you have a matrix organization. And a matrix structure, which is really kind of what most businesses have moved to here in the U.S. since the 1970s, and that is on page 98. And really then what you see is organizations, they're siloed, but they go up and down, right? But they go sideways as well. So make sure that you review that, Exhibit 411 on page 98, and really look at this idea of how project managers come into play and different departments come into play. Let's see, what other important components? Oh, external environment, looking at, some of the things that really can wreak, havoc. These ideas of technological forces, economic forces, social forces, sociocultural, legal, right? Things going on in the legal world, tariffs, things like that can change an industry. And so a lot of times we have to be aware of all of the moving parts that are happening around us. Changes in trends, right? When we have trending changes, we have to make sure that we are, as a company, ready for those new changes and make sure that we are adaptable. Corporate culture. So one that's important here is page 110 when we look at the competing values framework. And a while back, I did a study with a colleague about the competing values framework through some research, interviewing some faculty at a university to see what they felt, the university, how it was functioning for them. This was coming out of COVID. And looking at these different areas. Is it a clan type society or a clan type culture, an adhocracy, a market, or a hierarchy? And really, in business, we like to put a lot of things in, in the X and Y axis and graph them, right? Or put them into quadrants and see Venn diagrams, how things overlap. We like to use a lot of diagrams, right? So if you look at page 110 and you look at you can score, basically, you can interview folks at an organization, then you can score through, there's a set of interview questions that you can use that are tied to this competing values framework, and then everybody scores how they feel on these, and then you use all of those scores to compile kind of where each individual sees the organization, right? And since we're in a grid situation, each individual would be like a dot on that grid. And then once all of the individuals are plotted, you can see where the data set is, where the heavy, basically layer of plotted dots are. So if most of the employees, their overall responses kind of were near the adhocracy or the market, right? And means that they feel like that the company is more externally based than internally based, right? And you can kind of figure out then. So that's how you build the data set for that competing values framework, which is actually quite interesting to do. So that would be a great project for you to do someday, right, in an organization. But we can talk more about that, the competing values framework. Very interesting. If you have questions on that, let me know. But for this course, we're just kind of, again, this is a survey course, so we're going to touch on a bunch of different things relating to management. It's principles of management. So as you get into upper level management courses, you might dial in specific types of things and really start to go down a rabbit hole, maybe with this idea of competing value. That's all a whole area of research, right? What each chapter really is a whole area of research that you could be a course, right? Just like our Business 101 course. So that's chapter 4. And then for this week, let me scooch back over here. We also have a discussion post, and really, it's kind of a fun discussion. All of the discussions are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to get you to think, right? And to come up with something new. And so this discussion post for this week, again, they're not long. They're just to get you to think about how you feel. And this one ties to chapter 3. One of those individuals, right? That's really what management theory was built upon, right? Whichever one you like their kind of ideas, right? Whichever one you align with. And there's no wrong answer, right? And they're not actually like the end all be all. This is just a kind of a snapshot or a little cross section of individuals that are contributing or are considered to be contributing to the area of research or the field of management. So whichever one you pick or you seem to most align with their theory, right? Write 2 or 3 sentences as to why you align. And I see a couple in here already. Chester Bernard, Frederick Winslow Taylor. I see some folks talking about the Hawthorne studies. So great job so far. And, just say what was interesting to you and how, and really just be thinking about the project. I didn't really talk much about the project yet, but the semester end project is you are going to do your own summary of a chapter. So maybe as you're going along, you find a chapter that is very interesting to you. Maybe you like chapter 3. And so your job will be to summarize it. Typically, I think I said 8 to 10 slides. You're going to build a PowerPoint around it from scratch, around the chapter, how you would present the chapter, the things that you would highlight in the chapter versus what the PowerPoint is that I posted or the things that I've highlighted about the chapter. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That'll be due at the end of the course. But as we go through each chapter, maybe you want to put a check mark by the chapter that you like and want to, or don't like, right? You would do it differently. You would highlight some things differently. So questions for me, you can always reach out to me, crobertson@ec3pa.org, or text me, 814-490-6473. I am on campus weekly, at least once, twice, maybe 3 times. My